I discovered something unsettling during my time in Ireland, something that challenged my understanding of democratic norms and press freedom in the global north. First, I came to learn that Irish American authorities had perpetrated what can only be described as transnational repression across both the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. Second, I found myself on the receiving end of this systematic ill treatment. As a result, I sought intervention from media outlets that purported to expose state wrongdoing. What followed was a journey through institutional silence that would have felt familiar to anyone who had lived through the McCarthy era of the 1950s. I'm Kiana Canada, and this is Mimicking McCarthyism, an examination of an obstruction of justice, uncovering a new iteration of McCarthyism in Belfast and how it silences Black American stories on the island. Welcome back. Our journey begins in the Republic of Ireland. My outreach commenced with what seemed like promising avenues. Orla Ryan at the Journal, one of Ireland's largest native online news outlets, received my inquiry first. When she demurred, I emailed Shaman Malekmian at the Dublin Inquirer, a publication known for its coverage of the state's ill treatment of asylum seekers. I distinctly remember both journalists, or someone with access to their email accounts, had engaged in what I can only characterize as an elaborate exercise in signposting directing me elsewhere while refusing to investigate the substance of my claims. The Irish Times, despite maintaining a dedicated column, news new to the parish by Sorcha Pollock, addressed migrant and asylum seeker concerns. Also declined to publish my story, perhaps because there was a hunger strike at that moment, but that pattern raises fundamental questions. These were not fringe publications on shoestring budgets. The Dublin Inquirer has established credibility covering precisely the demographic intersections relevant to my situation. Pollock had published extensive reportage on immigration experiences and systemic challenges faced by newcomers. Yet when confronted with allegations of state-sanctioned persecution in my case, these institutions collectively retreated into bureaucratic silence. When Irish American state-sponsored intimidation compelled my relocation to Northern Ireland, I experienced momentary relief. For instance, I discovered my accommodation at the Park Inn Hotel was situated directly across from the BBC. I disclosed to Guy Grandjean that substantial evidence suggested I was being subjected to political repression linked to articles I had authored for The Jurist, a legal news and commentary platform. Grandjean declined to publish my article. Then I spoke to Matt Fox. He declined, and then I spoke to another journalist. The pattern solidified into something more ominous than mere editorial disinterest. It suggested either institutional instruction to suppress the narrative or a collective assessment that I lacked sufficient storygenic qualities to warrant coverage. RT was often leans toward progressive coverage, never responded to my inquiries, despite visiting their studio on multiple occasions on 24 Ormer Road. Even when I changed my strategy, sending multiple publications across both jurisdictions, offering for me to author the column myself, removing any burden of investigative labor for their staff, silence remained the universal response. I established a Medium account and began publishing there. almost immediately, engagement metrics revealed anomalies. Content appeared to be subjected to throttling, a practice whereby platforms algorithmically restrict visibility without explicit notification. Comments, shares, and engagement indicators disappeared or failed to materialize in patterns inconsistent with organic reach. Someone wielding substantial institutional power appeared to be orchestrating systematic suppression. A reasonable and prudent person examining the circumstances holistically would conclude that coordinated interference was at play. The alternative, that content addressing political repressions, surveillance, and transnational overreach simply failed to resonate with any audience, defied statistical probability given the demonstrated public interest in such topics. I ceased publishing analytical pieces and confined my output to public statements. What if I transferred my content to another platform? I migrated my content to Substack. The identical suppression patterns manifested there and persist to this very day. No engagement. The same phenomenon extended to Facebook. No engagement there. The last authentic, measurable engagement with my work occurred in 2022 when I maintained a LinkedIn presence and contributed to the Jurist. For nearly 4 years, some modern iteration of a McCarthyist operative embedded within an intelligence apparatus had been shadowing my content across multiple platforms. Shadow banning, also termed stealth banning, constitutes the practice of blocking or partially restricting a user's content visibility without notification. The mechanism differs fundamentally from outright suspension. A shadow ban user can post, interact, and observe their content as if functioning normally, yet that content remains invisible or substantially deprioritized for other users. Throttling operates similarly, algorithmically limiting reach and suppression hashtag visibility. The fact that my social media accounts appear in search results and remain technically accessible does not demonstrate genuine accessibility. You see, shadow banning operates precisely through this ambiguity. Content exists in a digital purgatory, visible to the creator, yet hidden from broader audiences. Platform algorithms can selectively suppress content from appearing in followers' feeds, excludes posts from hashtag searches, and remove accounts from recommendation engines while maintaining the facade of normal operation. I acknowledge readily that my content does not represent advanced social media production. I also recognize substantial room for improvement in my understanding of platform dynamics and audience engagement and strategies. With no funds at my disposal, I understand my videos lack the production quality that attracts organic viral distribution. But these limitations do not in themselves demonstrate an absence of interference. A reasonable and prudent person would note that complete absence of engagement across multiple platforms following previous periods of documented interaction suggests external suppression rather than content quality alone. Black American activists, particularly those engaged in progressive and socialist organizing, have documented extensive experiences of shadow banning and algorithmic suppression. During the resurgence of Black Lives Matter protests in 2020, creators reported dramatic engagement drops, content removals, and hashtag suppression, specifically affecting posts about systemic racism, police violence, and extrajudicial executions. Research has documented repeated instances of shadow banning against Black users, pointing to algorithmic biases embedded in these systems. These patterns establish precedent that platforms do engage in active suppression of political speech, particularly speech challenging state power or institutional racism. Could this constitute McCarthyist censorship? If so, is there evidence of it happening in Belfast? Between 2011 and 2024, the Police Service of Northern Ireland conducted 21 unlawful covert operations attempting to unmask journalist sources. 8 journalists were subjected to illegal surveillance. Of the 8, 2 documentary filmmakers investigating state collusion had their phones monitored, offices raided, and equipment seized. Did the PSNI or some intelligence agency connected to it, like NISOs, understand how to manipulate the press apparatus, like McCarthy? You see, McCarthy grasped what reporters craved: front page placement. He instructed them what to write and what to admit. McCarthy dispatched investigators to excavate compromising material on journalists covering him critically, including Phil Potter of the Baltimore Sun, whom he threatened with subpoenas on multiple occasions without following through. McCarthy memorized newspaper deadlines, both late-night cutoffs for morning editions and late-morning deadlines for afternoon papers. He deliberately released inflammatory accusations minutes before the deadlines, ensuring reporters had insufficient time to verify claims or solicit alternative perspectives. This allowed McCarthy's allegations to dominate front pages, while rebuttals, if they materialized at all, appeared days later buried in back sections. Was someone replicating this methodology in the Irelands? Was this operational logic behind the Belfast Telegraph publishing a photograph labeling me an anti-immigrant protester and then removing that photograph, despite the years that I advocated for asylum seekers? Were intelligence officers or cooperative journalists in Belfast being deployed to collect compromise on media figures should they dare publish accounts of the global North's perpetration of transnational repression against its own citizens? It is a question which I currently do not have an answer. McCarthy consistently sought what Larry Tye characterizes as, quote, perpetual coverage with practically no perspective, end quote. He generated accusations with such velocity that debunking one claim became irrelevant to reiterate a fresh scandal had already captured headlines. The architect of my persecution would necessarily continue operating behind institutional veils, yet perhaps patterns offered clues. The Belfast community elements that appeared coordinated against me shared a singular characteristic: their disdain or explicit rejection of far-right ideologies like myself. As a Black American socialist, minority communities, diaspora populations, and fellow socialists in Belfast organically represented my natural allies. Takura Makoni was the policy analyst at Exani and helped asylum seekers in some capacity. I think he still does. Yet his disregard for my concerns was striking, and I couldn't help but sense that my nationality was, as a Black American, played a role. Perhaps the dynamics between the U.S. and the Middle East, its tempestuous relationship, was a response to that tension. Makoni is Zimbabwean. His Palestinian flag, armband, and keffiyeh signaled solidarity for all to see, which I can respect. On the other hand, I stood with the Jewish community, but not with war. There's a distinction there too often lost in today's polarized climate. It seems clear to me that Makoni's distance was not coincidence. It was a deliberate choice that I believe was rooted in bias, a blend of anti-Black American sentiment, given his response when I mentioned Tariq Nasheed on one occasion, and anti-Israel hostility due to the war in Palestine. In my honest opinion, I believe Makoni's treatment of me is anti-Semitic. Let me explain. According to the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, acts are anti-Semitic when the victims of the attacks, whether they are people or property, are selected because they are or are perceived to be Jewish or linked to Jewish people. Makoni's alteration of my food bank voucher, which included a COINTELPRO trope, is evidence of that fact. Not to mention, it is my honest opinion he did it because of my link to the Jewish community. This underscores how identity politics can fracture solidarity instead of fostering understanding. But Makoni is right. Northern Ireland can be a difficult place for some migrants to feel at home. He captures this reality in his own words, quote, depending on how you look and how you are perceived, that is where the migrant issue comes in, end quote. His observation speaks to a deeper truth, that identity in Northern Ireland is often negotiated not through self-definition, but through the gaze of others, in my personal opinion. With that said, when Takura learned I was an American who had a complicated relationship with the Muslim community, he didn't seek to bridge our differences, in my opinion. In my honest opinion, I think Makoni reinforced them, shaped by how he perceived me. Makoni has often said, quote, when you see injustice, stand up for that person, end quote. Yet, for nearly 2 years, he stood on the sidelines as I faced injustice in Belfast, because I told him about it on multiple occasions. He watched, never intervened, despite me asking him to on multiple occasions. This is despite my advocating for Makoni when, one, graffiti messages pushed him out of his home on one occasion, and then two, my replenishing the room with commentary when one of his inquiries at the Let's Not Talk About Racism Symposium at Queen's University, Belfast, was met with silence. When I visited Axani, I saw a picture of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, which was hung prominently on the wall in Axani. I'm not sure if it remains there today. These two figures, in my honest opinion, would be turning over in their graves if they discovered Makoni made use of what I can only describe as a COINTELPRO practice to silence my voice in Belfast. This is my honest opinion. Extraordinary effort had been expended operating continuously, systematically, to ensure these communities would not align with me. But to what end? Who benefits from my isolation? And is there an evidentiary trail connecting this apparatus to this organization and demographic group that rejected engagement? The trail obviously exists. Now, the question is, what Irish or American firm is on the other end?